Welcome to Managing Love Intelligently. I'm Jason.
And I'm Stephen Ng, marriage and family therapist. And every single time I get together with Jason, he asks me about something we've never talked about. And so I'm always caught a little bit by surprise, but they're always pretty good topics. So what is it today, Jason?
The pressure is on. So today's episode is relationship variables that don't matter. So last week I was telling Steve about meeting a woman at Burning Man, and I said that she was really great, beautiful, all the stuff seemed good. She lives in another state though, which I'm looking at a pattern into. Trying not to do that, but I'm like, why not try to just get to know the person? But she's younger than me. She's 28, and then you mentioned, and I'm 40. And you mentioned how some like that stuff kind of doesn't really matter, and that there's variables that really don't matter. So that's kind of like in relationships. So you said age is one of them, and then it sounded like there were a few other ones. So I thought we could kind of like maybe go through some of these relationship variables that don't matter and kind of examine why they don't or why people think they do and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I know I'm going to step on a few toes with this one today. And of course, I'm always glad, you come up with some really good topics, and this is one of them. So let's start with, what are you trying to do when you are dating? Well, you have already decided you want to date with the idea of conducting an intentional interview as a step, not just in enjoying the other person and getting to know them, but as a vital step toward possibly building a relationship that might last. And therefore the dating and the getting to know her process is really part of an intentional interview.
Yes, that's what I'm doing.
Yes.
Correct.
And so in the midst of all of that, there's going to be just a ton. I mean, there's so much data that gets downloaded in even a 5-minute conversation, much less a month or two of dating somebody. There's an awful lot of data coming at you. And I think kind of like a samurai warrior out in the middle of a battlefield, you have to be able to discern that which is immediately relevant from that which is merely distracting. Mm-hmm. And when I think about this, there are a number of examples that come to mind, and you may think of some as we keep talking, but some of them are institutionalized, like age is one of those things that most of us think, well, if I date too young or if I date someone too old, then I'm going to be encountering disapproval from my friends, my family, or my society at large. Mm-hmm. Or for some unknown reason, it's just going to be foolish and I'm just going to be making a big mistake.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to form a strategic alliance with someone who can adore you and love you and have your back, of all the variables one might consider, like, is she willing to commit to an abuse-free relationship? Is she interested in true equality? Is she truly compatible in terms of so many of the other things we've talked about on other podcasts? And then to add, but was she born on the right day in history? And it's a little bit like in tandem with, but is she the right sign? And are astrological signs compatible? Well, that's, I have as much fun as anybody, playing around with astrology, but I don't really believe that that's a relevant variable. And I really don't see how her birth date, in terms of what year she was born in versus what year you were born in, is really relevant to the conversation about the quality of the actual relationship. Because as we all know, there are people who are far more mature than their years would indicate. And there are people who are plenty old enough who are grossly immature and still underdeveloped. And so the actual birth date seems to be pretty irrelevant compared to assessing the quality of the character of the person I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So then I've got to somehow let go of my squeamishness about dating someone who's obviously younger and incredibly beautiful and attractive, and all those people looking at me wondering, what does she see in him?
Yeah.
But I also know men who have married women who are substantially older, even a bigger age range than what you're talking about.
Mm.
They've married women who are significantly older and gone on to have great marriages and great lives with that partner.
Mm.
So it's really, it's about the person, not the birth date, at the end of it. So that's one example.
But what about...
Does that make sense though?
Yeah, the quality of the relationship is
and her character.
And her character. And I think also the stuff we talk about, like the abuse-free life, fair fighting, and the other things that we discuss, intimacy, these sort of topics, if they can understand that, if they're an adult, I mean, obviously they have to be an adult to engage in an adult relationship, but if they understand that, and I've had experiences where I dated people in their 20s who understood that sort of stuff, but maybe they don't know who, they could not know a band,
Right. For me, it would be, you don't know who the Beatles are? What? Wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
But to be able to understand cognitively, there's so many bright young people who could perfectly understand all of the words you're using that describe the ideas we talk about.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they're emotionally prepared to engage in a relationship based on those principles.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, it is also no guarantee that if you met someone who was 5 years older than you or 10 years older than you, that she would be prepared to do that.
Yeah.
So it's really about character, and we have to assess for character and get to know these people. And, as part of that delightful experience of conducting the intentional interview. But I've got some more examples.
Yeah. Let me just go on this a little bit longer. What about men or we talked about men versus women. So you would say, if you're dating, like, would you advise people just be open? Like, don't limit yourself to a specific age range? Because on dating apps, which I know that you don't like, but a lot of people are on, they could put age range, like from this age to that age. Would you recommend it's better to keep it open?
Well, of I would curse all dating apps if it hadn't already been done by somebody far more powerful than myself, because they're utterly unhelpful. But I think more important is the algorithm in your mind. So you have some sort of a checklist that you think would be your comfort zone, let's say.
Yeah.
And so you're attracted to her, and she was somewhat attracted to you, I'm guessing. And so the two of you are talking and exchanging information. And if you just have to remind yourself repeatedly, and her age is irrelevant, and her age is irrelevant. But what if she were 21? Would that make a difference? Again, it isn't about the birth date. It's really about, as long as we're talking about you dating in the legal range.
Yes.
And you're not dating girls who are underage, as long as you're dating adult women, I think it's really up to them. And I would say this to everyone listening. It's kind of strange to think about, but I think immediately apparent once one reflects, that for you as a man to be proactively being dismissive of women because of their age is not only ageist, but sexist, because these are adult women who are responsible for taking care of themselves. Your focus needs to be, and I'm only using you as a placeholder for all the rest of us.
Yeah.
Each one of us needs to be aware that we and we alone are responsible for the choices that could affect us in these situations. So long as you can, be yourself and be comfortable and enjoy the date, then thumbs up, you're ready to go, have a great time. And it's up to her to say, well, he's kind of creaky and the gray is coming into his beard. And I don't know if I could bring him home to mom. But then there are plenty of families who do have, even the parents have an age difference. I've met those couples too. So
Yeah.
I just think it really depends on each individual and what they're comfortable with. But to say logically that, well, no, that's an absolute deal breaker. That would absolutely disqualify any woman from further consideration for me. Well, I don't see how that's rational, and it just seems inevitably sexist and ageist.
And then really quick, and then we can move on to another variable. What if everything's going great, but then you're afraid of your friends and family disapproving?
Yeah, then I think for me, that's a situation that cries out for a personal spiritual journey in facing my own fears.
And facing your friends and your family and being
facing them and being, because if I'm comfortable within myself with the situation, then I think I could entertain somebody complaining.
Yeah.
But I would have to ask them, so what does that mean? What birth dates do you think I should date? Because it becomes silly, right? Because there is no logic to that.
Well, they make logic of it.
She's 33, so that's okay, but not 32. Or 31 would be out of the question, absolutely out of the question. What about 30? But what if she was older? I mean, mom, dad, friends, what do you think I should be doing with my life?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's right. It's my life, not their life. So you're not it's sort of like, a couple that decides to have an abortion. If I don't believe in abortion, well, then I won't get one. But it doesn't mean that they shouldn't get one.
Yeah. Cool. So then we can move on from age. So hopefully you all heard that and you could wipe it from your brain.
Is that the bigger consideration? What others would say to you
with age for myself?
Yeah.
It was funny because after I met this woman, another one of my friends who is a woman, which we talked about that, which I'm trying not to have women friends. I'm just have some that were in with me before. Grandfathered in before I got the whole talking to by Steve. And I hear it and I get it now. And I'm not, sorry, women, I'm not accepting any more friends at the moment. Yeah, she was starting to say how she's dating her age range from this age to this age, and then how would never date somebody below. And then I made a comment about, that thing about I've dated people who were younger and they were more mature, and kind of had that whole conversation. And it was kind of, I don't know. Sometimes if a man dates a younger woman that's too young, it seems like there's some stigma tied to it.
Did your friend give you that kind of feedback?
I didn't tell her because it's a complicated situation.
I get it. Okay.
It's a complicated situation, but I didn't say that, but I bet if I did, there would be some sort of thing. But again, that could be a projection, but it seems like from the conversation I heard, it's like, oh, it's funny that I just met this person and she's having this conversation about dating between this age. And I think she said like people shouldn't date that, whatever. She like had kind of a thing.
Yeah. And I've heard that kind of thinking from other people, men and women. And I just, I would say it's really unhelpful to have a rule based on birth dates. I think the rule would be more like the more challenging assessment would be not what date or what year she was born on, but what is her character like?
Yeah.
And are the two of us compatible? Because that's really the issue at the end of the day, including, I think, whether or not you date someone younger or older or exactly the same age. It's truly irrelevant of all the. If you met someone who was married at the same exact date and time as yourself, but her personality was abhorrent to you, that thinking kind of doesn't really work at any level, I think. And in a similar way, this is probably going to offend some deeply religious conservative people, whatever their religion. But I would have to say, when we're trying to build a relationship with another human being, and going about it intentionally with an intentional interview. And what we're looking for is not so much control as happiness, love, and an abuse-free environment where we can share our lives together and grow more intimate over time. I would say our religious orientation is irrelevant.
Yeah.
So and I know that
that's another variable, religion.
Yeah, I would say her religious orientation and my religious orientation are irrelevant in the sense that if we're striving for genuine intimacy is the ability to safely share our lives together, not identicality. It's not, to be truly intimate is not to be identical. For example, speaking of genitalia in kids, you should cover your parents' ears because I'm going to be talking about genitals here. In terms of intimacy, those of us who are heterosexual would like to know that our partner is going to have different genitals. Mm-hmm. And yet somehow we're still able, voila, to have sexual intimacy where we safely share her femininity, his masculinity, and it all works very well when it works. But there are those who think, no, and I've talked to women from my Al-Anon days who said, no, the men in my life have always been drunks. I'm tired of men who are drunks. I'm going to be with women for now. And they go forward. And really, was it the genitals? No, I think it was actually the drinking and the abuse that ruined the relationship.
Yeah.
And two women in a relationship are equally capable of having abusive, alcoholic behavior, just as two men are. And so when I think about intimacy and spiritual intimacy in particular, I could imagine a woman who is, say, Hindu or Jewish or maybe a complete non-believer sharing a life with a man who has a completely different religious orientation. And that if the two of them were loving and respectful of one another, it would be intriguing to know how they each perceived the day or the news of the day or their sexuality from their own spiritual perspective. Mm-hmm. So everybody's got a spiritual perspective because spirituality is a much larger set than religion. Religion is a subset of spirituality. And for those who remember set theory from high school, and in all forms of spirituality, what spirituality does is it offers meaning and context to our lives, to our decisions. It provides a guidance in the invisible, unseen portions of our lives, morals and values, that sort of thing. And no religion can tell me what my values are. My values are unique to me as a human being. And even if I were a member of a religion, meeting a co-religionist who went to the same temple or mosque or synagogue, he would not necessarily have the same values that I have, even though we have so much in common. Mm-hmm. So being able to have true spiritual intimacy, I would say, is completely detached from whether or not we're in the same religion. Now, clergy by the thousands across America and by the millions of conservative believers would disagree with me and say, no, Jews should only marry Jews, Catholics should only marry Catholics, and so on. But I just don't think that that's relevant if two people are able to truly be intimate and share their spirituality with one another without judgment, and where it's really safe to be who you are and continue on being who you are. Mm-hmm. And one is not trying to manipulate or coerce the other into a different worldview.
Yeah. So you don't have to go to church with, say, if I met a Christian woman and she was like, well, and we accepted that, I wouldn't necessarily have to engage in that.
I know that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And in the
some people think, oh, well, I have to because she's Christian, I have to go.
Well, and her parents might think so, and her clergy might think so. But what matters is what she thinks and what you think. And so, and you'd want to ask questions about covert agendas. Just because we're dating, don't get the idea that I'm going to start attending your church, or don't get the idea I'm going to convert. But I always want you. I think we would be well served to communicate that we're always open to hearing about her point of view. I just don't want to be preached to. I would want to have a conversation, not a sermon. And there's a distinct difference, because a conversation is a back and forth, and it's not a conversation is very pleasant and could be very, very much not an argument. So I've never been Hindu in my beliefs, but if I met an amazing astrophysicist from, say, Hawaii, and she was a Sikh or a Hindu or Jewish or Muslim, I just don't think that would matter to me one way or the other. I would be perfectly comfortable, and I'd be comfortable with whether or not her beliefs were purely cultural artifacts that, she engaged in certain holidays, but she didn't really believe, or if she was a true believer. And say one to Lord Brahma for me. I just think it's irrelevant to the quality of the relationship between the two people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. But I've definitely thought the opposite. I've thought, oh, well, this person's this, and I grew up Catholic. I always thought it was ridiculous. I thought it was beyond boring. I didn't understand any of it. It just was one in one ear, out the other. Painstakingly boring. So then I became kind of more like agnostic, sort of, in my beliefs. But I have had people who were Christian, or they want a Christian person, or they want the person to match up with their religion, or they're like, well, I'm an atheist and I can never be with somebody who is fill in the blank, because that's just not going to work. And for a time I thought that was true. But now that I know that there's other aspects of relationship, like putting weight on religion is really pointless. So it's clear for me at this point, and especially if she knows that I'm not going to be going to church on Sundays.
Right.
And she's cool with that. If she's not,
I'm sorry, I'm running over you, but if I were, and I've never been a Buddhist, but if I met a woman who was a deeply learned Buddhist, and she always had these amazing things to say about her worldview, I just think, as a person who's a non-believer, I would probably find her fascinating. And the same with a woman who is Hindu or Muslim. I think it would be rather fascinating, so long as they could accept me. I'd be wide open to what they had to say.
I'd even be open to maybe Christianity. I don't know. I don't know. They always seem so smug to me. I mean, sorry, Christians, but they want to like push they're very pushy. They remind me of pushy salespeople, and they want to bring you to God and accept Jesus into your heart. And it's just lay off.
Well, we say that because I think we grew up in America and live here, and that's where the predominant religion. But I'm pretty confident, after talking to people from other faiths, that there are plenty of Muslims who are very doctrinaire and very controlling, and plenty of Hindus who are very controlling, and so on around the world. But it's a really, it'd be wonderful, wouldn't it, if we had this shorthand? Oh, you're a Hindu? Never mind. But it doesn't really work that way. Or, oh, you're a Christian? Come on in. I want to get to know you. But that really skips over who the person is. And,
well, it's all who they are, though. To them, it's like, oh, you're a Christian. That means we're just like each other. Come in.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of the person who identifies as one religion, say Christianity. But how much difference is there between one Christian and another? Well, a lot. There could be some really loving, tolerant, understanding Christian, and there could be a very controlling, dogmatic, preachy Christian. And so there's no escaping the rationality of, I need to get to know the individual. And that's what makes religion irrelevant. Like you said, exactly. It's like, but I think that they think that way, though. It's like, oh, if they are Christian like me,
then we are good. We're like, we're tight with God.
I see.
We understand love. So that, but that's their like irrational belief.
Right. That is an irrational belief, because just because we're mouthing the same words and we believe, we can both pray the same prayers, doesn't mean we're thinking the same way about those prayers or about those beliefs.
Yeah, exactly. They could be so vastly different. And I've met enough religious people to see some great ones and also some that are just horrible. It's like the same thing with age, like with the maturity level. It's like a 20-year-old could be more mature than somebody in their 40s or 50s. It's like, so it's again like getting into meeting who the actual person is as an individual.
Yeah. So I've got some more. I don't know if we have time, but
we have tons of time.
Oh, okay.
What's next? So age, religion.
I think there's a vast class of irrational and irrelevant sort of beliefs around how to qualify another human being based on our life experience. Because, and to use a personal example that I've used before, I had so little sense of connection and love and intimacy and even fun that in my first marriage, that I resolved coming out of that I would never get together with a woman who didn't love backpacking. And only to find out that, I had met a woman who was crazy about me, who was loving and kind, with whom I had a lot of things in common. And she actually liked me and liked spending time with me. And she was glad to celebrate with a bottle of champagne when I came home from the backpacking trip, but she had no intention of ever shopping for a blow dryer cord long enough to go on a backpacking trip. It just was not going to happen.
Yeah.
And now looking back on it, I think, oh my goodness, what a foolish belief, what a foolish qualifier for a person in my life. But there are other people who have similar sorts of experiences. Oh, I'll never get together with a man or woman who does this or who likes that, whether it's they like if you had a traumatic experience being with somebody who is really into dog shows and then you meet somebody who really likes his dog or her dog, and you're conflating the one traumatic experience in the past with this new person, and we all would need to do our due diligence to where we are actually capable of discerning what their character is. Because there are funny stories about parents and partners who think more of their animals than they do of the humans in their family.
Yeah.
And that's awful, right, for the humans. But then there are also stories of people who love their animals very much, but are so incredibly loving and kind toward people that it's never a conflict. So I think it's really hard to come from a place of trauma and then to let go of one of those trauma triggers as the irrelevancy that it is. So years ago, I had a female client who was robbed in a bank by the same gentleman multiple times, and he was wearing a certain type of outfit each time, and she
Did she work at the bank?
Yeah, she was a teller in the bank, and his clothing, his shirt, as a matter of fact, became sort of a trigger. And whenever she saw that same sort of pattern on a shirt, and it was a common pattern, she felt distinctly uneasy. And did that have anything to do with the threat to her life? He was passing threatening notes and demanding money and that sort of thing. So no, the shirt had nothing to do with it. And it's the same with race. It's the same with socioeconomic status. I think it's somewhat similar with education. I mean, I do think education matters if it matters, in the sense that, if you're an intellectual and you really crave the companionship of someone you can really talk to, you don't want to get together with somebody who's anti-intellectual, but you can be a college graduate and be anti-intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
So you really got to, all of us have this burden, this responsibility on us to delve into the facts and try to assess what do these facts actually mean.
Mm-hmm.
So trauma triggers, I think, are irrelevant, but they may be adjacent to meaningful information that really does matter. So I think, I hope I'm not making it more complicated for people, but there are these irrelevant data points that just at some point in our life seem so important and seem to matter so much. And I can think of another one, boy, right off the top of my head here. They're coming fast and furious in my brain. And that would be body type. You know, we all grow up with a certain sense of what our type is or what we like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all of my girlfriends in high school were this type, and then we're blinded as we go into our adult years from even considering what women of a different type might have to offer.
Yeah.
And so we're out with friends at a nightclub or a bar, and we don't even look at the other women who don't fit our pre-established criteria, when really body type is, I mean, I think for a normal human, body type is really an irrelevant variable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to be a pretty shallow person. And if you are, and you can embrace that, you know, more power to you. But if you're actually trying to build a relationship based on equality that makes sense, where you enjoy intimacy and you're feeling loved, whether her breasts are one size or the other, or he's this tall or shorter than that, I don't think those things really matter.
Mm-hmm.
I think what matters is what kind of time I have when I'm with this person. Can we enjoy each other's company? Do they make me laugh? Do I have respect for who they are? And if you can manage all of that, though, that kind of transcends whatever body type you think is really important in a relationship.
But what if the body type was tied to like I guess, what if they just weren't attracted to the person? Oh, yeah.
I mean, obviously, I hope it's obvious that I'm not against attraction, you know, and I think for men in particular, there's that whole engine that's hydraulically driven.
Mm-hmm.
And so without attraction, the wedding tackle is simply not going to fire up.
Yeah.
So she could be a great human being, have a wonderful mind, but even if Ruth Bader Ginsburg were single and I was single, I'm probably not going to find her attractive in that way.
Okay.
Right. So, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I'm arguing for is it's an irrelevant variable if I am attracted.
Got it.
Yeah.
I have one too, TV shows, which I had in a relationship.
What?
Well, you know how people like watch TV shows and they get so into them and then they remember the lines or they remember scenes, and then that becomes kind of like a bonding experience between you and maybe your partner.
Yeah, so it's like one where you bring up that scene and
mm-hmm.
and you communicated 10,000 words because of that scene in the movie or the TV show.
Yeah. Would you say that is a variable that doesn't matter?
You know, I can imagine a situation where it is wonderful, but I can also imagine a situation where it's irrelevant. For example, you in particular, meet a wonderful Buddhist woman from Thailand,
mm-hmm.
and she's never seen any of your TV shows, but she brings so much to the table in terms of physical attractiveness, in terms of just the most amazing personality and character. And it's like, who cares about that?
Yeah. Well, to me, it seems like just something that, I don't know. It's like, if you're still doing that, isn't that kind of immature? Like,
well, I reference movies when I'm talking to friends and clients, and I'll say, you know, that scene in Glenn Ross where they say only closers get coffee.
But you know,
it means something
mm-hmm.
because we have a shared culture.
Yeah.
And I think that's a way to communicate that's awfully handy. But would I refuse to be friends with somebody from Africa who'd never seen that movie? No, of course not.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm getting at. Like some people like get offended or like, oh, well, or they'll write them off. They'll be like, okay, well, they don't know these references. See you later. You don't get it because you're not engaging in me in this way that to me, there's something seems kind of controlling or, I mean, I'm like, I don't care if somebody, I'm not going to tell someone about the stuff that I watch. I mean, unless they really want to know or expect them to know it or know the I don't know. I was in a relationship like that. So I guess maybe it's my own trigger, trauma trigger here. But it felt like, to me, it's like if I didn't know it, that it was like, well, he's not really connecting to me, that it's just not going to work out because he doesn't have this
I see what you're saying
stuff in there. So
yeah, that does sound like a really personal example, kind of like my example of the whole backpacking thing. And I think, again, that would be one of those trauma triggers I'm bringing from an old relationship into perhaps a new situation. And I've got these ghosts in my brain who remind me, oh, you don't want to get involved with somebody who does that again. But the likelihood of that ever happening is pretty, it's like the likelihood of the guy with the similar shirt robbing me again, because the last guy who, held me up was going to do this. And even if it did happen again, it would be an irrelevant, sort of coincidence.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's what it seems like to me. But I don't know. And you got any other ones as far as?
Well, I thought of a few and now I can't remember them. And I think mostly I guess I'm considering how common it is now that you've brought this thing up. I never really thought about how common it is. Oh, here's one. I think political differences. There's a Democrat, James Cargill, and his wife, whose name I don't recall, but she's a pretty fervent Republican. He's a equally fervent Democrat, and just to add to the confusion, he's significantly older, and she's younger, and yet, by all accounts, they seem to have a very satisfying relationship.
He's breaking all the variables.
Yeah, he is, and the fact that he can do that tells us all, oh, those things are very irrelevant. Except, and I'm going to go on record saying this, because for the very controlling person who needs to have control over the other person in this way for themselves to feel safe. So, because I'm so scolding, I'm so disapproving, I'm so shaming, that if she doesn't vote the same way I vote, then there's no way I would share a house with her. Or, somebody who doesn't own guns, or who doesn't believe in gun ownership, or somebody who doesn't believe in how important Super Bowl Sunday is.
Yeah.
And there are people who kind of shop for friends and lovers that way. If, I've been with men who, if you don't hunt, then you got nothing in common.
The men want the women to hunt?
No, it's saying to other men who could potentially be friends.
It's like that, yeah.
And people who fish, who are so passionate about fishing, they feel the same way. But, really, it's not about the passion for the activity. It's about the complete lack of other significant parts of their life. If all I've got is fishing, then how could we have a relationship if she doesn't fish or if she doesn't hunt? And so I think that's really something to take a look at. If she doesn't share my religion and I'm all about my religion, and that's pretty much all there is to me under the surface is my religion. Well, no wonder I'm feeling kind of panicky about this.
Well, I think that's what it is, like hitting that in the head. Like if they're all in on their religion, if they're all in on their TV shows, if they're all in on whatever the thing may be, their politics, that seems to be where then they don't know who they are.
Right. That makes sense. They haven't yet even discovered or even developed their character, perhaps.
Because they're just following along something external, like that they're getting fed, and then they're just
Yeah, it would
regurgitating
be a
that.
little bit like the avid stamp collector or the avid bird watcher who's really into their hobby. And I don't want to take away anything from anybody on having hobbies they're passionate about, but I think all of us would agree, yeah, a well-rounded person would have a lot more to them than just one passion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to get to know that person, regardless of whether we share an avid love for bird watching.
Yeah. You mentioned education. I wanted to go back on that really quick. Is that a variable, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a variable, right? But is it a relevant variable to choice making? And I think, again, I kind of a yes and no for me. And the reason is, even there are those people who are autodidacts, meaning self-taught. They're so smart and they're so given to intellectual exploration of the world around them that an educated person could comfortably share their company without ever noticing that they hadn't gone to college.
Yeah.
But there are other people who not only are anti-intellectual, but they actually have never, done anything to improve themselves beyond just going to the basic public school experience. And they've got nothing to say on so many topics. And he or she may be very attractive to us. And we may really enjoy that last weekend we had.
Yeah.
Because that was amazing. And they made us laugh. And there were so many fun times. But again, we're not shopping for a weekend. If you're looking for if you're doing an intentional interview and you're really thinking about a long-term committed relationship like a marriage, then a weekend is hardly an indicator of how that's going to play out. So over time, you find out, oh, they're really not very smart. And that feeling leaves us feeling kind of lonely, because that means there are so many things I'm never going to be able to talk to them about. And if I try to talk to them about, then the liability is on their part that, I'm just not smart enough for you, and they're feeling bad about themselves. And so I think IQ is a variable and education is another variable, and both matter to some degree, but I would say character matters more, because as long as my partner has an avid interest in the world, I've met plenty of people who had only a high school education or even less, maybe they dropped out and they got their GED, but they are brilliant. And so they're very intelligent and they're very avid learners. And so they're reading all the time and they're getting an education. And somebody like me is going to have somebody to talk to about things that matter to me. And it isn't an absolute, is it? It's a personal compatibility issue. There is no absolute right or wrong on this.
Yeah. What about, here's one, travel?
Yeah, tell me more about your thoughts on that one.
This one seems like it could be another kind of education, yes or no. So say, for instance, one person traveled all over the world, the other person traveled to a few states.
So so let's bring up somebody like Socrates. Not known for his worldly travels, and yet kind of a smart guy who came up with a few good ideas. Or even Jesus Christ, who wasn't known for, I know some people say he went all the way to India, but as far as the historical...
I heard he was in California.
But in terms of again, it just depends on the person, because there are some people who really benefit from the broadening experience of sampling other cultures. And there are other people who are so smart, they don't even need that. And there are still other people who really need that, but are so closed-minded that they just don't want to go there.
Okay.
So it's, you got to do this deeper dive. And again, it's all very similar to your penchant for ninth graders. It's
no, that's not true.
You're dating a girl or talking to a woman who is 28. But if that, her age is so irrelevant, you have no choice but to try to get to know her to see who she really is.
Yeah, that's what but sometimes I'm like, oh, do I need to tell her like, hey, I'm 40, right? Like, but she didn't ask.
Yeah. And I think if it comes up organically, where it come in whatever way that would be, you would, of course, be honor bound to be honest about that.
Yeah.
But because I don't think you feel ashamed of being 40 or uncomfortable with that number any more than I feel. I mean, I feel more and more like the dragon guarding his precious gold when I think about all the years I have sitting under me. So I'm delighted to have my age, and hopefully with science, I'll be able to enjoy more years ahead of me. But I would never lie to someone. I mean, how really pathetic that is, on those dating apps when the older guy or older woman, I suppose, lies about their age in order to try to appear more attractive, including, horrifyingly, submitting a different picture of someone who actually is younger, like a younger sibling or even a model who has nothing to do with them. And I've seen people do that too, where it's just out and out deception. Yeah. Because they're so desperate.
Yeah, that's not good. So out of all of these variables, it seems to be the main thing is character is number one.
I don't see any way around that. Even if you, for example, met some woman who felt the same way as you did about TV and travel, and that she had exactly the same amount of education and an appreciation for things that are intellectual. Does that mean, this is so much better than what I had in my first relationship? We have a lot of compatibility. The question is, do you have enough? And I would argue, no, you still have it's so far all the lights are still green, but we still need to do our due diligence and find out more about this person. Yeah. Because her character. She may be a woman lacking utterly any sense of compassion for her fellow human beings. She may be cruel or thoughtless. I mean, there's so many character issues that we really have a hard time. We seem to have a hard time in our neediness remembering to assess for, and we look at the other person with these rose-colored glasses, presuming that, well, if she's beautiful, of course she's kind, or she likes me, so of course she's compassionate. Yeah. I mean, when really we don't have that data point established yet. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be the main thing. And it seems like once you start looking at that core of who the person actually is, like, are they kind? Do they make me feel safe? Are they able to not be abusive towards me? It's like when you think of the core things, again, like we talk about, like all this other stuff seems to kind of fall away. Because if you have that intimate, safe relationship, you could go off, like you said, and go do backpacking by yourself. And you could do these other activities all by yourself where you don't feel that it's a diss to you or some sort of like, it's not something that's bugging the other person with you, or you're getting bugged that the other person is not coming along. Because then it's like you're trying to control them and trying to make them be like you. And it's like, you're enough of you. I'm enough of me. It's like,
I got one of me. I don't need more of me.
Yeah. But it seems like most people want to make more of them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think, to be blunt about that, I think it reflects an inability to love. Because if I can love only myself and people who reflect myself in various ways, then I'm really not very loving at all, am I? And that's, I think, the great thing about getting past a subject that I think we've talked about, and that would be narcissistic love. You meet somebody, you're very attracted to one another, and it's all good. And really, in those initial first 90 to 120 days, what I love about her is what I love about me. Yeah. And that's not love. That's just narcissistic love. And that doesn't reflect well on me. And if I can't ever break out of that, or I'm not able to love someone who isn't that perfect reflection of me. And so, and I've seen so many marriages go down that road, and it's just unsustainable. It's just awful.
Mm-hmm. Where they just start in that narcissism and then it fades away and then they're just stuck with people who they don't like, or
yeah, or the presumption is that my way of living is the right way of living. And she and I have enough narcissistic love that the first 90 to 120 days carries on for quite a while. But say a year or 2 or 5 later, she expresses what? An opinion different from my own? Good God, man. You know, and then I have to correct her and I have to get her on the right path. And that's really ridiculous because even in terms of something like religion, you know, people lose faith in certain religions and then they want to step away.
Yeah.
And if that was such an essential building block, now what are you going to do? Get a divorce, you know, over this? And if she doesn't believe or he doesn't believe anymore, really, if faith is a gift from God, for those who believe in God, if faith is a gift from God and there's no faith anymore, then that really isn't on the human being who doesn't believe anymore. That's really about an argument you'd have to take up with God. So this adds to the complications, but I'd hate to think anybody listening to this wouldn't be comfortable discarding some of these irrelevancies like age and religion, because they just clutter up our thinking and they're really not helpful in guiding any of us toward the happiness we're looking for in a relationship.
Yeah, and like you saying with your current wife, with the backpacking thing, it opens you up to a world of people that you may have written off because of one of these sort of variables. And it's like you don't know, like you said at one time in an article or in a podcast or somewhere, you said sometimes you don't even know what you need when it comes to love.
Absolutely. And I know for me, thinking of my own wife, I never even imagined that women could be so wonderful. I had no idea that that was a possibility. So even if I had been looking diligently within my own conception of what women have to offer, I wouldn't have been able to be open to the universe bringing someone into my life who was that brilliant, that kind, and who possessed a beauty that I was really unfamiliar with. So, you know, having experienced that, it's like I've set so many of my preconceptions aside. And, you know, if I were ever to have to be on my own again, I feel pretty satiated. But going forward, if I were to start dating, I would just be dating with a pretty much a blank slate. You know, as long as it was an abuse-free exchange, I'd be open to, you know, getting to know this other person. And as long as if there was some level of physical attraction, sure, I could see going forward and getting to know them with an idea that, well, maybe down the road we could be a couple. But I think you have to really get to that place where you're really open and you can admit to yourself, I really don't know very much when it comes to who I could love or who could love me, or even what love is. You know, so many of us start off life thinking we know what love is, like kind of like what Carl Rogers called love. He described it as a feeling of positive regard, or warm feeling of positive regard. Well, yeah, that's sort of it. But it doesn't really come close to describing the totality of it by any means. So being humble enough to be open-minded and to accept that there's a lot I don't know, I think that's where everybody might be well served to start off with. And letting go of birth dates, letting go of religions, letting go of other irrelevancies is going to just really help clear up your thinking and help you to make some better decisions in the future.
Cool. Great spot to end. And we'll wrap up here. And to end, we have a listener question.
I love listener questions. What's this one?
This one is as follows. Hi, Dr. Ing. After sex, my husband says, thank you. I've told him I prefer I love you or something more romantic, but he doesn't seem to get it. Am I making a mountain out of a molehill? Should I just be glad he wants me after all these years?
How many years was it?
It didn't say.
After all of these years.
But it sounds like
both of them, both of those years. The short answer is yes, you should just be thankful. He's a wonderful guy, I'm presuming, in all of the other ways. And he says thank you, which kind of sounds like he got a burger at Burger King or something. And we don't have product placement for Burger King, so I'm not getting compensation for that. But if you, I don't even eat meat. I don't know why I said that. She didn't get a tofu burger at the local vegetarian burger stand. But if he's appreciative and he enjoys that, being with you, and you're enjoying being with him, but he got his lines wrong. And he said thank you instead of damn girl, I love you so much. I mean, come on. I mean, how fragile is our love anyway? I don't think it needs to be that fragile. And if we have 99.9999% of what we want, then I think we're good to go. So stop complaining. Yes, embrace gratitude and move on.
This could also be a relationship variable, a new one.
That he doesn't say the right things.
Yeah, that doesn't say the right things after sex.
Yeah, or before sex. Yeah, I mean, or during sex. I mean, what if he's telling me jokes? Can you imagine somebody getting, like you, I know you're in improv, but you get together with a woman who's a comedian and she tells you funny stories while you two are trying to have sex.
I'd say not here, lady. Not here. Keep the funny in the theater. No, I'm joking.
Of course you are, because it would be hilarious. And if she could make me laugh during sex, that'd be fun. But
unless she was like roasting me or something.
Oh no!
And then telling me how much I suck. But I mean, that could be, some guys are into that. So
yes, I suppose that's true. The right person could be really into that.
It's like a niche that somebody could.
I just think if we're so controlling and so rigid that we need to have the script as written in my brain performed properly with every sexual encounter or every date where we go out, I just think that's actually rather silly and absurd and overly controlling. So yes, just embrace some gratitude that you got a really good one and move on.
Cool. Well, thank you for that question. And thank you, Steve. And we'll wrap up here. And really great episode and really fun to hear about all those different variables. And for everyone out there, focus on the character, drop all the other stuff, enjoy your lives. Thank you all for listening, and we will catch you next time. Goodbye.